I travel without insurance. I'm sure most of you have insurance on your automobiles and your homes. And you may say, well, that's a preposterous concept to live your life without insurance. But let me put it to you this way. Has anybody ever explained to you that there was an alternative to insurance? That there was a thing called a bond that you could have used, which comes from the old common law term bond servant, a servant who is bonded or pledged for his debt. The same thing is true with licensing. I'm sure that all of us in here have licenses, or we have had at one time or another. I remember the first license that I obtained. I was 16 years old. I wanted a driver's license because I wanted fast wheels. And I went down to the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, and I went through the normal indoctrination. And I asked the lady behind the counter, what is the purpose of this license? Now, I'm only 16 years old, but I asked the question, what's the purpose? And she said, it's to show that you're competent, and you have to take a test in order to get a driver's license. So I took the test, like all the rest of you have. And when I got through taking the test and had passed it, I still didn't understand why I needed the license, because I was either competent or I wasn't. And after I'd passed the test, I was competent, wasn't I? So therefore, I didn't need the license. But I took it anyway, and I put it in my back pocket like everyone does. And I didn't think too much about this until the next licensing came up, and it was my pilot's license. I was about 19 when I took the test, and I asked that question also. I went to Oakland, California to take that one. And I asked the man that was giving the test, what's the purpose of this? And he said, it's for competence. Well, obviously, I was already competent because I'd already soloed. Since I'd soloed, then I obviously knew how to fly. So if I knew how to fly, then why did I need a piece of paper in my pocket to show you that I knew how to fly? What difference did it make to you whether I knew how? I was the guy who was going to live or die if I didn't. But that one was a little different. You see, I didn't get a license from the FAA. I got a certificate of competence, and as long as I kept my medical current and my logbook up to date, I could fly. Now that one is a little different from the driver's license. The third one was the marriage license. Now that one I did totally blind. I had no experience whatsoever. And I asked that lady behind the counter, what's the purpose for this license? And she said, I thought competence would come into play, and I was going to have to show that I was competent. But no, I didn't. She said, this one is for disease. We want this license so that we can test you for disease and find out whether you're diseased or not. I passed that test also, which then left me with the question, well, now that I don't have disease, why do I need the license? So we put that one in the top drawer, and I went on to the next one, which was my contractor's license. Now, I had to take a pretty rigorous test for my contractor's license, and I asked the gentleman, what's the purpose for this? And he said, to demonstrate your competence again. But I never went out and built anything for anybody. What I did was I read a book. I memorized the facts, and then I went in to take the test. You know, you could be a school teacher from Monrovia, California, read the book, memorize the facts, go in and take the test, and you too could qualify to be a general contractor. I knew there was something wrong with this process of memorization and recitation because I'd never built a house in my life, and I didn't know how to build a set of stairs, which is the first thing I always ask a carpenter when I hire him today. Can you build a set of stairs? If he says, yes, I can, he's probably a carpenter. If he says, no, I can't, he's probably a general contractor. Now that's called a professional license, and the next one was my corporate license. Now they don't call this one a license, they call this a corporate charter. So I went to my attorney and I organized a company. And my attorney, when I asked him the question, I said, well, what type of a company should we form? Should it be a proprietorship or a limited general partnership or corporation? He never hesitated. He said, a corporation. I said, oh, okay. Well, after all, he'd been to law school, and I looked up on the wall and I saw all of the certifications that he had. He must have had 10 or 15 pieces of paper on the wall. And I was very impressed. Anybody with that many pieces of paper must know something. That's the same fellow, now remember, that defended us in 6 lawsuits, and we lost 6 out of 6. Whatever he was competent at, it wasn't defending lawsuits. So we incorporated, and when we did, we found that there were repercussions that came in. There was OSHA and the EPA, and there was the State Tax Commission. One day I woke up and I said to my secretary, would you please tell me how many government agencies do we deal with And she said, well, I don't know. So she went to the file cabinet, and a couple hours later she came back and she said 28, I think. 28 agencies of government. You know, you have to have a city business license and a county business license, and then you have to deal with the Department of Transportation and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Then there's the Department of Labor and the Social Security people and the income tax people and the state sales tax people and OSHA and EPA, and the list just goes on and on and on of all these government agencies that you deal with. And all of us in this room deal with all of those agencies. Maybe not all together, but you deal with 2 or 3 or 5 or 9 right now. And those people control you. There's a building inspector who comes over and tells you how to build your building, and there is a medical examiner who tells you that you're practicing medicine without a license, or you're incompetent to do whatever it is that you think you are competent to do. But what causes this? Where do these licenses come from? What is the legal relationship? Why is it that the state of Colorado hires people to come out and investigate your activities and then tell you how to conduct your life? What's the purpose behind it? The story begins about 1905 in a case called Hale versus Hinkle, in which the Supreme Court made this observation concerning corporations and individuals. It's a short, plain statement, conceding that the witness was an officer of the corporation under investigation and that he was entitled to assert the rights of the corporation with respect to the production of its books and papers, were of the opinion that there is a clear distinction in this particular between an individual and a corporation. Now, I want you to notice that there is a clear distinction in a corporation, that Safeway, and an individual. Whatever this mysterious creature called an individual is, there's a clear distinction. And that the latter, that is the corporation, has no right to refuse to submit its books and papers for an examination at the suit of the state. Now, a lot of us have been examined by the state, whether or not it was done by suit or whether it was just an OSHA inspector who walked in, or an EPA man, or a state tax commission, sales tax man. Somebody walks into your store and he says, I want to look at your records and books. Could it be that you thought you were an individual, but in reality you were acting or were a corporation? Because you do not need to sign a corporate charter to become a corporation. All you need to do is act in a corporate capacity in commerce under the Commerce Clause, and you're treated for the purposes of law, taxation, as a corporation. And you have no right to refuse to submit your books and papers to the examination of the state. Now, there's another fellow here called an individual, and the court goes on to say the individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He is entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. Please note the word private business, because many times we think that we're operating in private business. After all, isn't that what we call small private business? Public business. Isn't that public? Isn't that the telephone company and PG&E? That's public business. But Sally's Graphic Arts, isn't that private business? No, it isn't. In fact, Sally has a social security number, or perhaps even a federal or a state identification number, a tax ID number, which makes her a corporate capacity. And she has all the rights, privileges, and immunities of the telephone company and PG&E without the financial resources to go along with it. His power, that is the individual's power to contract, is unlimited. An individual has an unlimited power to contract. How many of you have an unlimited power to contract? Or does government limit your power to contract by interfering with your business operation through inspections? He owes no duty to the state or to his neighbors to divulge his business.